After a black woman CEO experienced denial of service at her bank, she maintained composure. Within 5 minutes, the manager responsible for the incident was terminated. The errand was intended to be brief, approximately 10 to 15 minutes, a task easily managed between scheduled meetings. That morning, Nadira Langston, aged 48, the head of a multi-million-dollar tech firm located in Phoenix, Arizona, exited her driver's black Lincoln and entered Sycamore First Bank, carrying her company's banking portfolio carefully. She was unhurried. There was no need for haste. Her schedule had been completely free to allow her to complete the transfer of a substantial business account, which was one of several her company had been relocating for months. The account manager she typically collaborated with had retired, and today she was meeting the new team in person to finalize the documents. A simple, standard procedure. Her navy blue suit was expertly tailored. Her hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore diamond studs in her ears. Understated, yet refined. Her heels made no clicking sound as she moved. They barely rustled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had held a position of authority for a significant period and no longer felt the need to demonstrate it. Approaching the reception desk, she provided her name, Nadira Langston. She explained she was there to meet with someone from the commercial accounts department. The young woman at the counter glanced up, briefly nodding while entering information into the system. Okay, just a moment. It was then that things began. A woman, appearing to be in her mid-50s, with pale blonde hair and a rigid posture, emerged from a nearby glass office and walked over, offering a smile that seemed strained. "Can I help you with something?" she inquired. Her voice was concise. Nadira turned and offered her hand. "Yes, thank you. I'm Nadira Langston. I understand I'm scheduled to meet with someone from the business team. I'm completing a transfer." The woman didn't return the handshake. She looked at the folder Nadira held. "And you are representing which company?" "I'm the CEO of Bluestone Dynamics." The account was previously managed by Peter Larson before his retirement. The manager raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you're here, unaccompanied?" "Yes," Nadira responded calmly. "It's a private matter." A pause followed, one of those pauses that conveys more than a complete sentence, the kind where judgment is disguised as confusion. "Right?" the woman said, adjusting her position. "We generally don't permit walk-ins for high-tier accounts unless it has been arranged beforehand." Nadira stated, still calm. She retrieved the confirmation email. "Here's the appointment confirmation from your internal scheduler. Today, 9:30 a.m. The woman looked at the document, then back at Nadira. "Are you certain this wasn't intended for another employee at your organization?" Nadira blinked, deliberately and slowly. "I operate the company." A brief silence followed. "My name is Cheryl Bainbridge. I'm the branch manager. We're dealing with some concerning events lately. Individuals have been falsely presenting their credentials to gain access to valuable accounts. You appreciate the seriousness of this, I'm sure." Nadira fully grasped the situation. "Cheryl, is it?" she replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. "Offering my license, corporate ID, and the transaction papers I'm here to approve?" Cheryl's smile became strained. "It's simply procedure, Ms. Langston. Please don't view it as directed at you." Nadira had encountered that phrase on countless occasions, in numerous boardrooms, airport lounges, and hotel lobbies. However, before she could add anything, Cheryl motioned to the receptionist. "Could you please contact security?" Just to err on the side of caution. It was necessary to confirm her statements. Nadira's mouth remained still. Her tone remained consistent. "Are you summoning security?" she asked. "On the CEO of one of our most important prospective clients?" Cheryl's shoulders became even more rigid. "I didn't suggest that," I replied. "I simply stated we needed to verify." At that moment, a subtle change occurred within the room. A quiet hum arose from a man seated in the waiting area. A brief look passed between two tellers positioned behind the counter. A palpable shift occurred. It was evident Nadira had followed every procedure correctly, yet she was still being made to feel like an outsider. Nadira, however, was not prepared to accept the situation. Not this time. The bank lobby wasn't crowded. but sufficient people were present to observe the unfolding events. An older man, waiting in line, moved uncomfortably. A woman seated close to the loan office took out her phone, feigning a check of her email, but her gaze remained fixed on Nadira and Cheryl. The security guard was not yet present, but Cheryl remained steadfast, as if anticipating immediate reinforcement. Nadira carefully opened her folder. It contained all necessary documentation to confirm her identity: business cards, certified articles of incorporation, 2 forms of identification, and the bank's own records confirming the account transfer. She arranged them on the reception desk methodically, similar to a card dealer. Composed. Accurate. Here, she stated, that is my Arizona state ID. This document confirms my company's EIN. It includes the board resolution authorizing me as the account signer. In this, she indicated the final sheet, is your bank's welcome letter. Cheryl briefly reviewed the papers. Anyone can print documents, she stated, crossing her arms. I've worked in banking for 27 years. I've seen people pretend to be CFOs, consultants, even heirs to estates. We don't make exceptions just because someone claims they're important. Nadira's tone remained steady, but her eyes narrowed. So this isn't about the paperwork. It's about how I appear, correct? Cheryl let out a dismissive sound. I beg your pardon. You heard me. If I presented myself as a 55-year-old man in a Brooks Brothers suit, you'd be extending a handshake and offering coffee. Ma'am, please reduce your voice volume. Nadira responded. My voice is already subdued, her words sharp and clear. I am the CEO. You have reviewed the documents. You know my name. The only thing that seemed to register was that I wasn't what they anticipated. A silence followed. A protracted, uncomfortable silence, and then Cheryl spoke. It wasn't a shout, but it carried. You just don't look like a CEO? The statement lingered, heavy as smoke after a match. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person murmured, did she really just say that? The receptionist stood motionless behind the desk. She appeared to wish she could simply vanish. Nadira's eyelids lowered deliberately, yet her voice remained steady. I have secured more than $80 million in venture capital. I have spearheaded 3 product launches. I have presented as a keynote speaker at CES and finalized agreements in 6 countries. I don't need to appear any particular way to be completely myself. Cheryl began to respond. However, before she could, Nadira shifted slightly and asked the receptionist, is there a regional director assigned to this branch? The young woman nodded hesitantly. He is present today, in fact. It's a surprise audit. He's in the back conference room. Nadira's lips formed a slight smile. Excellent. I wish to speak with him. Then, Cheryl intervened once more, visibly agitated. There's no necessity for that. I am capable of managing this. Let's avoid making the situation worse. Nadira faced her directly. You have already worsened this. You summoned security. You rejected every form of identification I presented. You challenged my position, my firm, and my credibility, all without initiating a single phone call to confirm any detail. Therefore, no, you're not capable of handling this. The room fell silent. The receptionist lifted the phone and initiated a call to an internal extension. Mr. Dorsey? She inquired. There is someone present requesting to speak with you. Her name is Nadira Langston from Bluestone Dynamics. A brief hesitation. Yes. All right. I will inform him. She ended the call and turned to Nadira, her eyes displaying surprise. He is on his way out now. Meanwhile, Cheryl remained unaware of the significant misjudgment she had made. The door situated at the rear of the bank swung open, and a tall man, dressed in a charcoal suit, emerged. He moved with a brisk, purposeful stride, alert but not hurried. He held a slim leather tablet and wore an expression suggesting displeasure at being interrupted from meetings. However, his expression softened immediately when he saw Nadira. Nadira Langston, he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly. Yes, you must be Mr. Dorsey. He continued, Matthew Dorsey, Regional Director. I've heard a lot about you. Peter spoke very highly before he retired. We appreciate the opportunity to manage your accounts. Cheryl's mouth parted slightly, and her face paled. Matthew turned to her, appearing puzzled. Did something go wrong with the meeting? Cheryl struggled to find the right words. Yes, there was. I simply verified the credentials before providing access to the commercial suite. This follows our standard procedure. Nadira remained silent. She didn't need to. The receptionist, still positioned behind the counter, added cautiously. She contacted security, sir. She stated that we were unable to verify the client's identity. Matthew blinked. You contacted security? Regarding Ms. Langston? I was attempting to adhere to established procedures. Cheryl responded promptly. We've experienced individuals recently presenting fabricated business credentials. I prefer not to assume any risks. You understand how crucial our commercial accounts are. He gave her a direct look. Yes, I am aware. This is why we verify credentials, rather than form assessments of clients based on subjective impressions. Cheryl's shoulders tightened. Excuse me? She began. I've reviewed the compliance logs. You didn't even access the file she presented. You disregarded the scheduled appointment. You dismissed the identification. I was safeguarding the bank, she asserted. You embarrassed the bank, Matthew retorted. You've publicly humiliated one of the most significant clients we've onboarded this year. In view of customers, in view of staff, with no justification. A security guard finally arrived at the front entrance, his radio clipped to his belt, meticulously scanning the room, as if anticipating trouble. Matthew dismissed him with a wave. Everything's fine here, Eric, Cheryl repeated, her voice now trembling. False alarm. She had entered alone. Her name wasn't on the standard schedule. It was on the revised internal schedule, the one your assistant oversees. The same schedule you approve every Monday morning. You simply didn't review it, Nadira stated, stepping forward slightly, her voice low but clear. You hadn't acted without delay because of an absence. You paused because I didn't align with your preconceived notion of who should possess such authority. Matthew remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger. There was nothing further to elaborate on. Cheryl's mouth opened once more, but she spoke no words. Ms. Langston, Matthew stated, pivoting with a return to decorum. Would you be willing to accompany me? I will personally oversee your transaction from my office. Nadira acknowledged with a single nod. Certainly. They started to leave, passing the lines of desks and glass-walled offices. Cheryl stayed still by the front desk, her eyes wide, her face unreadable. No one moved towards her. The receptionist looked at her keyboard. The security guard walked away slowly, seeming unsure of what to do. Just as they were about to vanish down the hallway, Matthew halted and turned. Cheryl looked up, clearly surprised. My office. After this meeting, we'll be discussing your role here in detail. He didn't raise his voice. Wasn't necessary. However, Cheryl already sensed a change in the atmosphere. Matthew's office presented a crisp, though understated, impression. It featured clean lines, 2 chairs positioned across from his desk, and a tall window allowing morning light to spread across the carpet. Nadira waited until he invited her to sit, and even then, she maintained a straight posture and a composed demeanor. He closed the door softly, then turned back to face her. Ms. Langston, I want to apologize for what just happened. That should not have occurred. Not here. Not anywhere. You were treated unfairly, Nadira stated calmly, placing her folder on the desk. However, this isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last, Matthew responded, leaning against the edge of his desk. We have protocol for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. Cheryl disregarded every step. She didn't just disregard protocol, Nadira said. She formed an opinion of me immediately upon seeing my face. Matthew breathed out his nose, crossing his arms. I acknowledge that. He resumed looking at the documents she had placed before him, reviewing them without speaking. He wasn't hurried. He was carefully considering everything. Everything is in the correct order, he stated. I never questioned it. However, I do want to inquire. Did she allow you any opportunity to provide an explanation before summoning security? Not really, Nadira responded. She recognized my name, saw my face, and heard my title, yet still inquired if the appointment belonged to another person. Matthew rubbed his jaw. That will present a challenge for her. A significant one. Nadira inclined her head. I didn't intend for anyone to lose their job. I am aware of that. However, Sometimes repercussions are deserved. Immediately, his office phone vibrated. He answered, listened briefly, then instructed, send her in. A knock followed shortly, and Cheryl entered. The usual assuredness had vanished. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched. She walked as if unsure how to position her hands or where to look. Ms. Langston, she began, her voice quiet. I owe you an apology. I was mistaken. That wasn't my goal. You don't have to pretend, Nadira stated, interrupting. Her voice wasn't harsh, only resolute. You acted precisely as you did. You didn't believe I was who I claimed to be. And instead of verifying, you chose to embarrass me. Cheryl looked to Matthew, visibly wanting him to intervene. He remained silent. I've spent over 2 decades in this field. She continued, I've witnessed fraud, identity theft, all sorts of deception. And none of that pertains to me, Nadira stated. You didn't err due to caution. You err because you believed you could evade detection, Matthew finally said. Cheryl, following a review of events this morning, encompassing internal audit records and client appointment logs, I have decided to end your employment, effective immediately. Cheryl blinked. And? Are you serious? Yes, I am, Matthew replied. You breached client protocol, showed disrespect to one of our most valuable account holders, and created a public disturbance that jeopardized the bank's reputation. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, and it concludes here. She appeared ready to retaliate, but the atmosphere offered no space for her to exert herself. She faced Nadira. I didn't intend to cause you any personal offense, she said. You didn't offend me, Nadira replied softly. You showed disrespect. There's a distinction. Cheryl lowered her gaze, then pivoted, exited the doorway, and left it slightly open. Matthew remained still for a moment. Subsequently, he settled into his desk chair and raised his head. I trust that achieves a degree of responsibility. This is a beginning, Nadira responded. However, beyond the confines of that office, the narrative was quickly moving away from the bank. Information doesn't spread rapidly within a bank, except when a significant event occurs. And what unfolded that morning at Sycamore was not merely significant, it was irrefutable. As Nadira and Matthew left the office, the ambience in the lobby had fundamentally changed. Patrons remained silent. Tellers murmured behind their workstations. Cheryl's absence was more pronounced than her presence had ever been. The nameplate had already been taken from the front glass office, as if she had never worked there. Matthew walked Nadira out personally. I'll ensure the rest of the paperwork is managed by someone capable, he said. You shouldn't have to experience this level of absurdity. Ever. Nadira nodded. Accepting the folder, he returned to her. The paperwork is the straightforward part, she replied. He gave a quiet, respectful laugh. Indeed, they arrived at the front doors, where 2 customers graciously held them open. A teller rose from behind the counter and offered a small wave, hesitant yet genuine. The sun was ascending higher above Phoenix. The air was dry, and the pavement was warm. Nadira hesitated close to the curb, her driver advancing, the car door already ajar. She glanced back at Matthew. A statement you made in your office resonated with me, that occasionally consequences are deserved. He affirmed this with a nod. Yes, I agree, she stated. But repercussions lacking comprehension do little to affect change. Matthew lifted his eyebrows, showing interest. I don't want Cheryl to experience hardship, Nadira proceeded. I need people to understand this wasn't about me. This occurs for Black professionals, particularly women, on a daily basis. It happens at airports, restaurants, stores, and meetings. And frequently, no one faces termination. They're simply disregarded. Again and again, he remained silent. He allowed her to continue. Perhaps for the first time, someone like him genuinely listened. If the bank is to address this with seriousness, she stated, refrain from simply publishing a statement online. Avoid issuing a standard apology. Initiate a dialogue. Instruct your managers regarding the oversights made. Prevent this from recurring for the next woman who enters that establishment. Matthew inhaled deeply, his posture now slightly more burdened. You are correct. I am unable to reverse the events that transpired. However, I can ensure they contribute to a positive outcome. That's the true measure, isn't it? Nadira responded. Not what one accomplishes with an audience, but what one alters when unobserved. She entered the vehicle, and the door closed behind her. The interior was quiet, but the silence felt clean. Her driver glanced back through the mirror. Everything satisfactory, Ms. Langston? She looked at her hands, then out the window at the glass facade of the bank. Cheryl had resolved to ignore her. The crucial decision, the one that would have significant impact, had already been made by someone else. Yes, it has, she said softly. Nadira didn't know that within 24 hours the entire country would be discussing what transpired inside that branch. It began with a tweet, just a few lines from someone who had been sitting near the loan officer's desk that morning. Just witnessed a black woman CEO get denied service at her own bank. She remained composed, publicly addressed the bias, and the manager was terminated immediately. I don't know her name, but I won't forget her demeanor. By lunchtime, the tweet had surpassed 40,000 likes. By evening, it appeared on Instagram, then Facebook, and subsequently on local news. A local blogger identified Nadira's name by comparing information with a press release Bluestone Dynamics released earlier that month. A Phoenix reporter verified the information with the bank. By nightfall, Nadira Langston was trending across the nation. She made no public statements. Wasn't necessary. Others shared their experiences. LinkedIn was filled with accolades. Corporate professionals, frequently black women, recounted similar situations, being questioned at the valet of their own office buildings, asked to show ID 3 times before boarding first-class flights, being addressed as sweetie, even while leading negotiations worth millions. People described Nadira as graceful, resilient, and composed. However, those who understood the situation better explained that it was more than grace. It was a matter of survival. Simultaneously, Sycamore First corporate headquarters mobilized. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement recognizing the incident, confirming Cheryl Bainbridge's departure from employment, and affirming the company's dedication to equity and continued training. This response proved insufficient for the public. Numerous comments appeared, questioning how many other Cheryls remain working in your branches. And do your executives grasp that implicit bias training cannot address issues permitted by your hiring processes? Black women should not be expected to remain composed when facing disrespect. Nadira made no public statements regarding the situation until 3 days later when she consented to an interview on a podcast hosted by a longtime friend and business strategist, Leona Bates. They faced each other in a silent studio in Tempe, with microphones activated and without any prepared notes. Leona began softly, asking, "You've remained silent while the internet has erupted. What prompted this response now?" Nadira answered, "Because the matter is no longer about me." Leona focused on what this situation highlighted. Specifically, that despite possessing the correct titles, documents, and credentials, people still perceive you as an outsider. Speaking out is then labeled as causing a disturbance, while remaining quiet is interpreted as agreement. It's a draining predicament, regardless of the choice. They discussed the matter for almost an hour, extending beyond the bank to address the significant emotional burden of maneuvering within established hierarchies while burdened by long-standing prejudices. Nadira remained composed. She didn't express sadness or frustration. Instead, she simply stated the facts, clearly, steadily, and without question. Following the broadcast, a fresh surge of interest emerged. This interest was authentic, thoughtful, and not superficial. Fellow CEOs contacted her. Business publications featured the narrative. A headline declared, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Nevertheless, Nadira maintained a grounded perspective. She did not desire recognition. She sought transformation. And she understood that meaningful change rarely appears in news headlines. The bias appeared in hiring practices, policy decisions, and even in determining who was initially believed. Even after the initial news coverage faded and the events became part of collective memory, those who witnessed her that morning at the bank still remembered what they saw. A few weeks later, Nadira addressed a room full of college students at Arizona State University. She had not intended to give any public speeches that season, as her schedule was already very full. When a business ethics professor contacted her and requested a conversation with her class, she readily agreed. The event was understated. There were no stage lights or press coverage, just 40 students, some taking notes in notebooks, others using laptops, eager to hear from the woman whose experience transformed a regular bank visit into a nationwide conversation. She presented no slides. There was no podium. She simply walked to the room's front, paused, and began speaking. "I won't be telling a storybook narrative," she stated. "I won't be suggesting that if you labor diligently, no one will challenge you, because that isn't invariably accurate." The room fell silent, all attentive. You can possess the title, the suit, the contracts, the track record, and still be informed that you don't belong, not due to any failings on your part, but because someone else cannot envision your triumph without a face resembling their own. She surveyed the room. Her voice remained gentle, but each word resonated. And in those moments, a choice presents itself. Do you contract to ease their discomfort, or do you maintain your full presence, even if it creates tension in the space? A young man seated in the front row raised his hand. He asked, "How did you manage to remain composed during that experience? Weren't you feeling anger?" Nadira responded with a slow nod. "Naturally, I was. But anger is only valuable if you understand how to channel it. That day, I employed it to remain grounded. I employed that tactic to ensure she couldn't dismiss me without looking me in the eye while doing it." Another hand then rose, this time from a young woman. "What advice would you offer someone just beginning, who hasn't developed a resume like yours?" Nadira hesitated. "Recognize your value before anyone else attempts to define it for you. And if they try to diminish you, speak regardless, even if your voice trembles." There is a certain quality to her delivery, as if she were addressing herself as much as the listener. Following the presentation, students formed a line to express their gratitude. Some simply desired to shake her hand. Others sought guidance. One young woman, speaking softly, shared, "I'm studying engineering. I'm considering dropping out. I didn't believe there was a place for someone with my background." Nadira responded, making direct eye contact, "There is. And if there isn't, create it." That evening, back in her office, Nadira found herself alone at her desk, enjoying a cup of tea. Her inbox remained full. Her phone continued to buzz. The excitement hadn't fully subsided. She understood that the public's attention would fade. However, certain individuals would retain the memory. The students, the customers present in that bank lobby, the employees who witnessed a manager lose her position due to someone's unwillingness to yield. And perhaps, in the future, when a woman like her entered a place where she wasn't anticipated, she might be greeted instead of questioned. She might be respected, all because of one moment, one voice, one refusal to remain silent. If this story resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Change doesn't always begin with prominent demonstrations or widespread media attention. Occasionally, it originates with a composed, persistent voice that states, "This isn't right." Two teenagers walked into a car dealership with nothing but excitement and respect. Minutes later, they were asked to leave due to appearing suspicious. The following day, their billionaire father arrived, not to express anger, but to ensure the incident was publicly acknowledged. The sun was heavy over Tempe that afternoon, one of those dry, slow-moving Arizona days where the heat hums through the concrete. After track practice, Malik Townsend walked alongside his sister Ayanna through the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery, his gray t-shirt damp against his back. They weren't intending to cause any disturbance. Malik, in fact, had been discussing this visit all week. "I'm not saying I'm getting a car today," he said, adjusting the strap of his gym bag. "But I want to see what they have. Maybe something used, you know?" Ayanna laughed, tossing her braids over her shoulder just to gauge expectations before her birthday. "You really think Dad is going to let you drive yourself to school in a two-door coupe?" "Come on," he smiled, but his steps didn't slow. "Let me dream." The dealership lot was still. Sleek silver sedans were arranged under sun-faded flags. The glass doors reflected the heat, and the two entered as any pair of kids with questions and wide eyes. The air conditioning inside was sharp, a contrast to the warmth outside. A middle-aged man wearing a pale blue dress shirt looked up from behind a counter. His gaze first fell on Malik, then moved to Ayanna. They were neatly dressed, Malik in athletic gear, Ayanna in a simple dress and sneakers. Their appearance was unassuming, quiet. Nevertheless, the man rose quickly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice concise. Malik, always courteous, approached. "Yeah, just checking out some cars. Maybe looking for something used?" "My birthday is next month, and do you have an appointment?" A man interrupted, already walking toward them. Malik hesitated. "No, we do not allow unsupervised minors in the showroom." He cut in, glancing quickly at a coworker across the room. "Company policy." Ayanna's face shifted. "We're not touching anything." "Still, this is not a hangout spot." His tone had turned colder now. "You can look at the website if you're interested." The silence that followed was thick. Malik started to speak, then stopped. Ayanna's fingers gripped the bag strap with force. "We'll leave," Malik said softly. They departed as such. There was no shouting, no resistance. Only the measured walk back along the sidewalk, with Ayanna holding her breath throughout. She remained silent until they were settled in the back of the Uber before she spoke. "That man regarded us as if we were insignificant." Malik acknowledged with a single, almost imperceptible nod. His jaw tightened. He touched his phone screen, verifying the ride time, and then gazed out the window. Ayanna observed her brother's reflection in the glass. She noticed how withdrawn he had become. He wasn't typically a boisterous person, but this felt different. It wasn't simply quietness, it was control. She remembered seeing that expression on their dad's face once before. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" He hesitated before replying. "Malik? I don't know," he finally said. "I don't even know what to call it." It's not like the man had said anything outlandish. He simply didn't want us present. Ayanna reclined. "It seemed unbelievable to me." Neither of them spoke for the remainder of the journey. It wasn't necessary. They were both aware of what had transpired. However, the man at the dealership was completely unaware of who he had just dismissed, and by the following morning, he would discover it. The Uber proceeded through the hills of Paradise Valley, where the houses grew larger, quieter, and more dispersed as they ascended. Ayanna sat with her arms crossed inside the black SUV, the tinted windows shielding her simmering frustration. Malik remained silent, holding his phone with the screen dark. His thoughts drifted away. Their home appeared, a contemporary white and stone house situated behind a private gate. It wasn't ostentatious, but possessed an expensive quality typical of established wealth or astute financial acumen. Their father, Charles Townsend, had constructed his technology company from the ground up, initially offering hardware repairs in Flagstaff before achieving success with a data security startup. Currently, his name appeared in Forbes articles and at Silicon Valley panel discussions. However, locally, he was simply known as Charles. The children entered through the side entrance and placed their belongings on the bench close to the kitchen. The house carried a subtle scent of cedar and fresh linen. Their housekeeper, Mrs. K, looked up from the dining table while folding towels. "Hey everyone, is everything all right?" Ayanna mumbled in response. Malik did not answer. Their father's voice came from down the hall. "Malik?" Malik appeared in the hallway moments later, still wearing his navy polo, barefoot, and holding tablet. "You're back early," he said, giving a shrug. Charles noticed a slump in his son's shoulders immediately, and the way he avoided eye contact. He glanced at Ayanna. Her expression conveyed more than she likely intended. What occurred? Malik remained silent. Charles placed the tablet down and crossed his arms. "Malik," Ayanna exhaled. "A man at the dealership stated we were not permitted inside." Charles furrowed his brow. "Which dealership?" "Madison Auto Gallery, located off University Drive." "What precisely did he say?" Malik massaged the back of his neck. "He indicated we weren't allowed to browse. He mentioned they don't allow individuals under the age of 18 without a parent present and accused us of loitering." Charles remained motionless for a considerable time. His eyes narrowed a little, not in anger, but with concentration. That measured, careful assessment that indicated he was anticipating 2 or 3 moves ahead. "What did you do?" "We left," Malik stated. "We didn't want to create a disturbance." That was impactful. Charles inhaled deeply, moved into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. He offered it to Malik before speaking again. "You acted correctly. Do you understand?" Malik affirmed once. Then, his father settled onto a counter stool and looked squarely at him. "Please understand this. You are not inferior to anyone. I'm not concerned if you arrive in athletic wear or formal attire. Maintain your composure. And if someone perceives you as a cause for concern, that is their responsibility, not yours." Ayanna rested against the fridge, observing. Charles continued, his voice calm and measured. "However, you also need to be aware of this. Quietude does not invariably signify strength. Occasionally, allowing minor offenses to occur enables their repetition, first with one individual and then with another." Malik's throat tightened. "What's the plan?" Charles didn't respond immediately. He surveyed them both, then rose and retrieved his phone. "I'm going to speak with someone," Ayanna said, surprised. "With whom?" Charles replied, departing the room. The subsequent hours until tomorrow morning unfolded with an unusual calm. There were no shouts, no hurried phone calls. Charles prepared dinner as always, grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. They ate together as a family. A change was palpable. It wasn't animosity, it was determination. That night, Malik lay awake, gazing at the ceiling for a considerable time before finally falling asleep. He didn't fully understand what his dad intended with the discussion, but he sensed it would be more impactful than any outburst. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the manager remained unaware that trouble was brewing. Madison Auto Gallery commenced business at 9 a.m. promptly. As early as 8:45, employees began arriving, their keys jingling, coffee cups in hand, and sunglasses still on. The typical Monday routine. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, rested against the front desk, sipping his iced Americano and checking his phone. He no longer recognized many of the names of his inbox. Employee turnover was significant. The position offered good compensation for those who could sell, and he was a skilled salesperson. By 9:03, there was one customer in the parking lot. A navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom shimmered in the Arizona sun. It did not enter a standard parking spot. It did not wait in the rear. It moved smoothly to the front doors and stopped. Initially, no one exited the vehicle. Derek looked at the receptionist, then walked around the desk. "Are you expecting someone?" he inquired. She replied, her gaze fixed on the car, "No." Then, the door opened. A tall man emerged, wearing a dark blazer, sharply tailored slacks, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He moved deliberately, with composure. Without preamble, he pushed the glass door open and paused at the entrance. "Good morning," he stated, his voice smooth yet resolute. "I'm seeking a manager." Derek hesitated. "I'm the assistant manager. How may I assist you?" The man fixed him with a direct gaze. "You're not the person I require." At that moment, Kyle Linson, the general manager, emerged from the adjacent office. He was tall, red-faced, and perpetually seemed stressed. "Morning," he said quickly. "I'm Kyle. What can I do for you?" The man retrieved a card from his jacket pocket and offered it. Kyle read the name deliberately. Charles Townsend, founder and chairman. TNS Global. He looked up, a flush rising on his face. Wow, sir. I wasn't expecting," he stammered. "I imagine you weren't either," Charles replied, stepping further inside. "I won't take much of your time." Kyle indicated his office, his eyes briefly darting towards Derek. We could talk in here." But Charles remained still. "No need for privacy. This is a public place." "I'll speak briefly." Kyle nodded, appearing uncomfortable. "Naturally. Please proceed." Charles surveyed the showroom. "Yesterday, 2 children entered. One was my son, the other my daughter." Kyle blinked. His throat moved. "I understand. They were informed they couldn't browse, that they should depart, that this establishment wasn't suitable for them." "Sir, we have—" Charles raised a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I'm not seeking a reimbursement. I experienced no loss yesterday, but you did. You missed an opportunity to act justly towards 2 young people, Individuals raised to show respect for others, regardless of how they are treated in return. Several other employees had begun to move nearer, feigning to organize documents or wipe down surfaces. Charles continued, "My children are not disruptive. They are thoughtful, intelligent, raised with care, and they don't require your approval. However, they deserve to be regarded as people, not as dangers." Derek looked down at his shoes. The receptionist had ceased typing. Kyle cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, if I may, I'm not requesting an apology," Charles stated. Apologies are simple. The crucial aspect is what one believes when no one is observing. The choices one makes when they presume no one will question them. He paused, allowing the silence to linger. "Because next time it won't be my children. It could be someone who lacks a father with connections to the media. They will leave this place with a memory that will likely remain unspoken, yet it will stay with them for the remainder of their lives." Then he turned to depart. But just before opening the door, he added, without looking back, "You can sell luxury without being small. I hope you understand how." Outside, a small gathering had formed. Two individuals were recording on their phones, one local reporter acting on a tip, and a woman holding a microphone. Charles had not alerted them. The news had simply spread. A change permeated the air, not in temperature, but in feeling. Charles descended onto the dealership pavement with calm, measured steps. His expression remained steady despite the small group gathering. Two college students from a local school stood apart, their phones out, quietly speaking to one another. A reporter from KXME5 News was already in the process of speaking, murmuring in her microphone, uncertain if she was broadcasting live. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not seek out a podium. He paused close to the entrance, straightened his jacket, and began to speak. "I hadn't intended to offer any words today. However, I understand the nature of things. If I remain silent now, another will attempt to voice my thoughts." He raised his gaze, observing the limited faces present. "My son, Malik, and my daughter, Ayana, arrived here yesterday afternoon. They were quiet. They didn't disturb anything. They came here to observe. Like any other young person with a flicker of anticipation and a hope in their heart, his voice remained steady. It wasn't booming, it was gentle. So gentle, it compelled people to draw closer. Yet they were asked to depart. Not for violating a regulation, not for handling something inappropriately, but because someone determined they didn't fit, that they presented an issue before they uttered a single word. The college student clutching the phone released a quiet, trembling sigh. Charles continued, "I've worked my whole life to build something that would last. And I've taught my children that what you build doesn't just sit in your bank account. It lives in how you treat people, in the everyday decisions, the ones you make when nobody's watching." He paused again, not for drama, but because the next words meant something. "Yesterday, someone looked at my children and didn't see who they were. They saw who they assumed they were, and they dismissed them. It's possible to be disrespectful without raising your voice. Sometimes it's about making someone feel diminished in a place they were eager to enter." Behind the glass doors, Kyle stood watching, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Charles glanced over his shoulder briefly, then returned his attention to the people ahead of him. "I'm not suggesting anyone should boycott this establishment. I don't endorse that approach. I'm no longer even feeling anger. I am simply weary of observing this recurring behavior. It's deeply troubling to see young people treated as if they've committed crimes before any wrongdoing has occurred. Such experiences leave a lasting impact. Silence allows these situations to persist." Several more people paused on the sidewalk. A delivery person across the street adjusted their sunglasses to observe more closely. "I came today because my children should not have been subjected to that kind of treatment, and because I want them to understand that when something is wrong, it shouldn't be ignored. You confront it with clarity, with dignity, and without allowing it to change who you are." He retreated towards a Rolls-Royce, his hand resting on the door handle. "One more point. My kids left yesterday, holding their heads high. That speaks volumes about their character and reveals nothing about the person who attempted to diminish them." He entered the car and remained silent. The onlookers did not offer applause. There was no clapping, A stunned silence filled the space as everyone absorbed the information, the visuals, and the implications. Inside the dealership, Derek lowered himself into a chair. The receptionist's eyes were brimming with tears, and she couldn't explain why. Kyle Lenson stayed near the window, his arms held rigidly at his sides. Yet, he understood that it was no longer possible to manage the narrative. By that afternoon, the first video appeared on Twitter, followed by Instagram, and then the news. The story began to develop independently. By lunchtime, the story had moved beyond local coverage. A shaky vertical phone video, initially recorded by college freshman Tori Clements, had already garnered over 2 million views on X. The accompanying caption stated, "This man just entered a dealership that disrespected his kids and addressed the situation with remarkable composure. I'm truly speechless." Viewers weren't simply sharing the video, they were analyzing it, pausing specific moments, magnifying details, and engaging in discussions and debates within comment threads. A woman from Flagstaff shared a story, noting that Charles Townsend repaired her father's laptop in 2001 and refused payment. She described him as having always been exceptional. However, other reactions were less charitable. One anonymous user, whose profile picture featured an eagle, questioned why the children hadn't disclosed their father's identity, suggesting a desire to portray themselves as victims, which led to the situation escalating. The story subsequently appeared on morning talk shows. During a segment titled, "Billionaire Father Calls Out Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership," Good Morning Phoenix reported that the dealership's Yelp rating plummeted from 4.2 to 2.1 within hours. Numerous one-star reviews appeared quickly. Customers cited concerns like rude and dismissive staff, feeling that a teenage son was treated like a criminal and vows to never return. Some reviewers claimed that unless one is wearing a suit and tie, they would be asked to leave before speaking. Naturally, the negative response wasn't solely from unfamiliar reviewers. Community organizations also started focusing attention on the situation, advocating for discussions regarding young people, societal views, and implicit prejudice. Amidst this, the dealership issued a response. This was a brief, 2-paragraph apology published on their website and Instagram page, stating, "We regret the recent experience that took place at our showroom and are actively reviewing our policies. We strive to provide a welcoming environment to all guests and take these matters seriously." The reactions online spoke volumes. The regret appears to stem from exposure rather than genuine remorse. Instead of policy review, perhaps employee evaluation is needed. This apology lacks sincerity, resembling a fine instead of an expression of concern. Privately, Kyle Lenson was working to manage the situation. He had already contacted 2 PR consultants, both of whom advised him to minimize communication, avoid public attention, and refrain from attempts at damage control. However, online sentiment disregarded PR strategies. The public demanded openness, accountability, and concrete steps. While Malik and Ayanna remained at home, their phones buzzed incessantly with messages, some from friends and others from unknown numbers. Ayanna showed her brother a message that elicited laughter, even amidst the circumstances. "Girl, is that your dad on the news? Tell him to run for office or something. I'm dead." However, more difficult messages soon followed. "Why didn't y'all just walk away?" One read, "Ain't nobody owes you a car." Another stated, "Not everything is about race." A final message simply asked, "He probably thought you were skipping school. So what? Rich people want sympathy now?" Malik glanced at his screen, his jaw clenched. Ayanna touched his shoulder. "Don't read that," he mumbled, not looking up. He continued scrolling. Their father entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Put the phone down," Charles said. "Just for now." Malik paused, then placed his phone face down on the table. Ayanna did the same. Charles sat opposite them, leaning forward a little. Ayanna frowned. "You two didn't ask for this, but sometimes life decides your story's bigger than just you." "But we didn't even do anything," she added. "We just walked in." "I know," he replied. "That's what makes this so real. You did everything right. And still, someone saw you wrong." Malik stared at the tabletop. "Is it always going to be like that?" Charles paused, letting the question linger. "No," he said. but you'll face it again. And when you do, you decide who you want to be in that moment. Reporters continued to gather outside. Inside, a feeling deeper than anger began to develop: awareness. And awareness is a persistent force. As the sun descended behind Camelback Mountain, it stretched shadows across the towns and backyard. It had been 2 days since Charles spoke at the dealership, 2 extended, peaceful days filled with news coverage, messages, and public commentary. Yet, shielded by the hedges, a sense of calm prevailed. Charles stood by the grill, methodically flipping salmon fillets. Malik was seated at the patio table, his elbows on his knees, gazing out across the lawn. Ayanna was leaning against the railing, her face hidden within her hoodie. There were no cameras, no inquiries, just family. You know, Charles began, without looking up, when I was 16, I saved for 2 years to purchase my first car, a 1994 Corolla. It was faded red and had manual windows. Ayanna looked at him. You mentioned it didn't have AC, correct? Charles chuckled. None at all. A Phoenix summer nearly cooked me. But I cherished that car. I received that treatment not because of kindness, but because I deserved it. Malik finally glanced in my direction. Have you ever experienced something like that? Like we did? Charles acknowledged with a single nod. More times than I can recall. Being followed when entering stores. Being ridiculed when applying for bank loans. I was once refused service at a diner in Tucson. I was there with my code books in my lap, and I simply departed without a confrontation. But why didn't I respond? Malik inquired, mirroring my current reaction. Charles then turned another fillet. I didn't believe my voice held weight previously. I felt that remaining unnoticed was the sole path to progress. He paused, but I was mistaken. The grill emitted a quiet hiss. The truth is, son, enduring enough disrespect can lead you to forget what it feels like to be acknowledged. And I never desired that for you, nor for your sister. Ayanna took a seat next to her brother. You certainly ensured we were noticed. Charles now addressed them both. Being noticed isn't sufficient. One must be prepared for the consequences. The acclaim, the disapproval, the individuals who will support you for taking a stand, and those who will oppose it. Malik glanced at his hands. I never intended for it to become an issue. I simply wished to observe a car. I understand, Charles stated. That's what makes it significant. You weren't seeking attention. You were simply living your life. And someone objected to the appearance of that. They paused briefly. I am proud of you, Charles added. Both of you. Ayanna shrugged. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't attempt to demonstrate anything. You simply remained genuine, she said. It didn't seem courageous. It shouldn't, he responded. Courage is often understated. It's about not compromising your integrity in a world that occasionally lacks it. A quiet stillness enveloped the yard. Then Ayanna smiled. So, are we still searching for a car or what? Charles grinned. I anticipated you would inquire. Malik straightened up. Are you serious? Charles threw a set of keys onto the table. They fell near Malik's hand with a quiet clink. Check the garage tomorrow, he said. But it's not about the car. It's about who you become while driving it. That matters more than anything with an engine. Ayanna leaned into her brother, teasing. You better not crash it on the first day. Please, Malik shot back. I'm driving like it's made of glass. Charles laughed, and for the first time in days, the weight of the moment began to ease. Some stories conclude with anger, others with quietness. But this one concludes with a lesson. Sometimes the most effective way to respond is to remain upright, peaceful, truthful, and acknowledged. If this story evoked a feeling in you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge, connect, and remind us who we truly are. He ridiculed her speech, her attire, and even her willingness to voice her opinions. Yet, she remained composed, initiated playback, and observed the legal system expose him live. Danielle Riggins, having experienced much in her 42 years, recognized inconsistencies. The citation affixed to her windshield near the community center in Macon, Georgia, wasn't simply irritating, it felt targeted. She studied it briefly, peering at the listed offense. A citation for failing to yield in a pedestrian zone was received. However, she was not in the vehicle at the time of the alleged violation. Her Honda had been parked legally in front of the building while she was inside, leading a workshop for at-risk teens. She sighed, placing the paper into her bag. Danielle dedicates long hours as a youth counselor, providing assistance to kids who'd experienced hardship and lack sufficient support. Her financial status is modest. She is far from wealthy. Her profession consumed her, and with raising her teenage daughter and guiding children who resembled her younger self, her time was scarce. A penalty like this was more than just disappointing, it significantly impacted her schedule. However, it wasn't primarily about the financial burden. It was about the underlying issue of fairness. The subsequent evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and the citation before her. Her daughter, Aaliyah, was completing homework in the vicinity. "You're really going to fight it?" Aaliyah inquired, looking up from her textbook. Danielle chuckled quietly. "Yes, I'm weary of allowing things to pass." Aaliyah reclined. "Do you believe they will truly hear you?" Danielle paused, not responding immediately. She simply gazed out the window for a moment before replying, "I don't require them to listen. I need to be present and proceed according to my conditions." The following Monday, she contacted the municipal courthouse, requested a half day away from work, and highlighted her court date in red pen on the calendar. She chose a simple outfit for the hearing: dark jeans, a light blouse, and flats. No blazer, no makeup, just her natural appearance. The woman she saw in the mirror appeared weary, but also resolute. As she prepared to leave, she placed her phone in her back pocket, activated the voice memo app, and began recording. It wasn't an expectation, but a habit formed by experience. She's learned that people sometimes react negatively when a black woman asserts herself with assurance. She reached the courthouse 30 minutes before the scheduled time. The building was a small, aged brick structure with faded signage. Several other individuals were present outside, primarily working-class people attempting to find a moment for justice amidst their jobs and obligations. Inside, the clerk called names with minimal acknowledgement. Danielle remained still, her hands resting in her lap, awaiting her turn. The courtroom felt chilly. It wasn't until she heard her name, Danielle Riggins, case 407B, that her heart began to race. She proceeded to the defendant's table, her heart steady but alert, mirroring the advice she's given to the children in her youth programs. One can't always dictate actions, but one can control one's response, she observed. And that's when she saw him. Judge Gregory Lannister. Late 50s, silver hair neatly combed back, reading glasses perched low on his nose. His reputation was well known. Some described him as firm, while others labeled him arrogant. He glanced at Danielle over the rim of his glasses, his eyebrows subtly raised. "Ms. Riggins," he stated, emphasizing her last name, "let's proceed. I presume you're here to contest this ticket, issued by a trained officer?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I was inside a building, not driving, when the ticket was issued. I have witness statements available if required." He laughed, a genuine chuckle. "Naturally, you do," she replied, meeting his gaze. The judge then remarked, "You individuals frequently present narratives when appearing before the court. Always the victim. Never your fault. Let me guess. You didn't even see the officer writing it, right?" Her jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't simply skepticism. It was a more pointed feeling, and everyone in that courtroom could sense it. But Danielle remained composed, even as the atmosphere shifted. She recognized this was merely the start. Danielle did not react. She had encountered harsher remarks, both in delivery and purpose. However, hearing it from a judge in a courtroom populated by strangers carried a distinct discomfort. A heavy silence filled the room. People avoided reaction, though several eyes moved between her and the bench. Even the bailiff appeared uneasy. "Your Honor," Danielle stated, maintaining a calm voice, "I have proof I was inside. A sign-in log from the youth center. It displays my name and timestamp." Judge Lannister reclined in his chair and smirked. "You believe a log anyone can write improves anything? That's cute." A few quiet gasps arose from the back. Danielle noticed them. She also heard her heartbeat in her ears, but she remained focused. She wasn't present to be liked. She was present because she understood what was correct. I'm simply requesting the citation be reviewed in light of the facts, she replied. Oh, the facts, he mocked. Well, let me tell you the facts. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've seen all the angles. You people always want the rules bent when they don't go your way. The words landed like slaps. Not just the content, the way he said them. He treated her as if she were a child occupying his valuable time. Danielle remained silent. A response wasn't necessary. He examined her citation once more, leafing through several pages. What is this? He inquired. You didn't even secure legal representation? No, she replied, her voice calm. I am capable of representing myself. A brief, sharp laugh escaped him. Naturally, he said, turning to the clerk. Next time, we'll mandate representation. Perhaps that will eliminate the theatrics. A woman seated towards the back, middle-aged and white, holding a traffic ticket herself, noticed Danielle. She appeared stunned and visibly uncomfortable, quickly averting her gaze when Danielle's eyes met hers. Danielle paused, composing herself. She hadn't intended to confront authority, yet she wouldn't allow her dignity to be disrespected. Your Honor, she began, carefully selecting each word. I'd like the court reporter to read back your comments. The effect of this request was palpable, noticeably shifting the atmosphere in the room. Judge Lannister blinked. Please repeat the last few remarks for the record. The court reporter, a young man named Vince, shifted in his chair. Mr. Tiller, the judge snapped. We don't have time for this. Just proceed. Danielle remained still. Then I will replay it myself. She retrieved her phone from her back pocket. Several people in the gallery leaned forward, curious about what was about to happen. Ms. Riggins, the judge stated, her voice now firm, recording in a courtroom is a violation. I recorded myself, not the proceedings, she responded softly. It's legal in this state, particularly for personal safety. She indicated the screen. Her own voice played back, quiet and steady. Then his voice followed. Every word was audible. You people always come in here with stories. That's cute. The statement reverberated in the room, seemingly as if the ceiling had split open. Judge Lannister's expression changed, initially showing confusion, then irritation, and finally something akin to fear. He leaned forward. That recording is out of order, he stated. No, sir, Danielle said quietly. What you said was out of order. A low whistle escaped someone in the gallery, quickly stifled by a hand covering their mouth. The bailiff moved forward but refrained from touching her. He remained silent, positioned between the two, uncertain of his next action. Danielle returned the phone to her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't appear smug. But she looked directly at the judge and didn't blink once. He lifted his gavel but didn't strike it. His eyes moved towards the court clerk, then to the bailiff. For a fleeting moment, he seemed to lose command of the room. However, the significant change didn't occur until the recess was called. That's when activity began behind the scenes. The judge announced a 15-minute recess, and the courtroom began to clear. Danielle rose, murmured, extended her limbs. Danielle remained seated. She wasn't finished. Her hands were still, fingers softly intertwined. She showed no tremor. Her composure wasn't rooted in fear. It was a calculated approach. She's worked with numerous children who were disadvantaged by systems that fail to hear them. She consistently advised them to record everything. Even quietude can serve as proof. Now, it was her turn to act on her own counsel. She retrieved her phone once more, this time to initiate a call. Danielle reviewed her contacts and selected one named Ethics Board Local, a number she had saved years earlier following a school board hearing involving one of her students. She hadn't anticipated needing it personally. A woman responded, stating Judicial Oversight Office, South Georgia District. This is Ms. Carla Shep. How can I help? Danielle maintained a low, calm, and professional tone. Milisegun Shep. My name is Danielle Riggins. I am presently located at the Macon Municipal Courthouse, Room B. I have just experienced inappropriate conduct from a sitting judge. I possess an audio recording that potentially constitutes judicial misconduct. There was a pause on the line. I see, Ms. Shep stated slowly. Are you presently inside the courtroom? We're on recess. 15 minutes, give or take. Could you briefly describe what occurred? Danielle recounted the events accurately. Her summary contained no exaggeration, only factual details. The judge's comments, including mockery, the denial of the court reporter's request to read back the transcript, laughter, and dismissiveness were concerning. She stated, "I have a voice memo of the remarks. I didn't record the courtroom, just my own audio. This is legal under state code, 16 to Order 11, 62. A pause followed, then the statement, "Ms. Riggins, I'd like to escalate this to a supervising judicial officer. Can you remain in the courthouse?" Her response was yes. The concluding words were, "I'm dispatching someone now." Danielle ended the call, placed her phone in her purse, and released a quiet breath. She anticipated no accolades. She hadn't even expected victory, but she wasn't retreating. A young man, in his early 20s, visibly anxious and restless, approached her from across the room, waiting for his own case. "Ma'am," he murmured, "that was incredible. What you did required considerable bravery." Danielle offered a courteous smile. "It's not bravery when it's simply the truth." He nodded swiftly and retreated. Several others glanced in her direction, not with sympathy, but with interest. Something was different. They sensed it. 10 minutes elapsed. People began returning to the courtroom. The judge was delayed. The clerk appeared anxious. Then the door beside the bench opened, but it wasn't Lannister who entered. A tall woman in her early 60s, dressed in a tailored gray suit with short platinum hair and sharp eyes, appeared. She proceeded directly to the clerk, bent forward, spoke quietly, and then looked up at the courtroom. "Everyone, please remain seated," she announced. A murmur spread through the room. "Judge Lannister will not be returning to the bench this morning." Danielle remained still. "I am supervising Judge Merrill Vaughn, and I will be taking over this docket." She paused. "Before we continue, I need to speak with Ms. Riggins privately. Please follow me, ma'am." Danielle stood, straightened her bag, and followed Judge Vaughn through the side door. The hallway felt narrow and was still. Judge Vaughn guided her into a small conference room and shut the door. "I have listened to a portion of the recording," she stated without taking a seat. "I'm also informed of a previous complaint against Judge Lannister. These details might support an active inquiry." Danielle remained motionless, observing her. "I must ask," Vaughn proceeded, "will you sign a sworn statement and present the recording as proof?" "Yes," Danielle responded without pause. Judge Vaughn nodded once. Unbeknownst to Danielle, her voice, recorded during a moment of quiet self-preservation, was poised to trigger events exceeding the expectations of anyone present in that courthouse. Danielle re-entered the courtroom, with Judge Vaughn immediately following. The atmosphere had noticeably changed. Conversations were subdued, and expressions were more attentive. Several individuals who had previously disregarded her were now attentive, observing her with what appeared to be respect, or perhaps curiosity. Regardless of the nature of their attention, she perceived it, yet remained composed. She returned to her seat at the defendant's table as Judge Vaughn approached the bench and addressed the court clerk. Proceeding with Case 407B, she announced, "Ms. Danielle Riggins is present. Judge Lannister is officially recused pending review." The announcement settled over the room with a sharp impact. It wasn't simply a brief absence. The judge was gone, and seemingly without return. The thought remained unspoken, yet palpable. Danielle remained still, awaiting further instruction. Judge Vaughn examined the citation and Danielle's accompanying paperwork. This included the witness statement, the center's login sheet, and even a time-stamped text she had sent to her supervisor when she arrived that day. The judge looked up. "This is thorough, Ms. Riggins. You're clearly someone who values evidence." Danielle nodded once. "Working with young people, I've observed firsthand how things can unravel without proper preparation." There was a slight hesitation before Judge Vaughn responded. "It's a lesson more people should adopt as they mature, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't sympathy, simply recognition. One woman seeing another who chose not to compromise." Judge Vaughn turned the citation over, wrote something, and gave it back to the clerk. "This citation is voided," she stated. Ms. Riggins was released. Danielle did not smile. She merely collected her belongings. However, before she could leave, the judge stated, "For the record, your behavior in this courtroom, considering the situation, was remarkable. You maintained composure and dignity despite an unfortunate series of events." Danielle then permitted herself a brief, weary smile. "Thank you," she said. She departed the room as silently as she had arrived. But the atmosphere outside was altered. The hallway was filled with a palpable sense of unease. A courtroom aide, a young woman wearing dark-rimmed glasses and speaking with a hesitant tone, softly stopped Danielle near the exit. "Are you the one who recorded him?" she inquired, her eyes widening. "I am," Danielle responded. The aide looked around before saying, "You weren't the first. But you might be the one who finally got them to act." Danielle raised her eyebrows a little. "Others tried. There have been complaints," she murmured. "But nothing ever stuck. Either no proof or no follow-through." It was difficult to gain traction until someone possessed the courage and the evidence. Danielle remained silent. She felt no need to speak. Stepping outside, she inhaled deeply. The air seemed heavier than normal, not due to the weather, but because of the events of the past hour. As she approached her vehicle, her phone vibrated in her pocket. A new voicemail had arrived. She pressed play. "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Walt Desmond with the Georgia State Commission on Judicial Conduct. An initial recording from a Macon courthouse arrived this morning. We need to discuss a possible behavioral pattern concerning Judge Gregory Lannister. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." Danielle rested against the car door. Her intention wasn't to discredit a judge. She came to contest a traffic ticket. However, the truth unfolds according to its own schedule. And occasionally, when you voice a concern, you may inadvertently represent the interests of many others. By sundown that day, Danielle would discover the true extent of the situation. Danielle was halfway home when her phone rang again. She considered ignoring the call while driving, but the number displayed an official-looking area code for 78. She pulled over to the parking lot of a small grocery store in Warner Robins, parking under the shade of a faded sign, and answered, "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Desmond. Thank you for returning the call." His voice remained calm, but was precise, a person who carefully considered words before speaking. "We reviewed the audio," he continued, "and it's clear. Furthermore, it corresponds with prior grievances against Judge Lannister submitted during the last 3 years. Your testimony could be crucial in initiating an internal ethics review that has been delayed." Danielle tightened her grip on the steering wheel with her free hand. "What are the next steps?" she asked. "There was more," Desmond added. "An anonymous tip arrived this morning, shortly after your complaint was released on the internal channel. The tip contained financial records associated with Judge Lannister, including offshore transfers, unauthorized reimbursements, and a concerning pattern of rulings in favor of contractors with ties to a private law firm in Augusta." Danielle paused, visibly surprised. Could this be criminal corruption? Affirmative. And with this development, the situation extends beyond a simple personnel issue. It may involve criminal activity. She didn't respond immediately. Desmond continued, "You've already accomplished a lot. If you are willing, we might require a statement. You wouldn't be obligated to testify unless the investigation becomes more serious, and you would receive legal assistance throughout the process." Danielle breathed out, "I will do what is necessary." "Understood," he replied. "You will be contacted by one of our ethics advisors by end of day." "Thank you, Ms. Riggins. You've made more of a difference than you realize." The call concluded. Danielle remained still in her car for a few minutes, the quiet sound of far away traffic forming the backdrop. She wasn't certain whether she felt fear or power, perhaps a combination of both. She didn't share with Alia immediately, not due to concealment, but because she needed some time to process it herself. Later that evening, following dinner, as Alia cleaned the dishes, she inquired, "So, how did it go?" Danielle offered a small smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Let's just say I believe the judge won't be processing many more tickets." Alia grinned. "You didn't strike him, did you?" Danielle laughed. No, darling, but I made my point. The television played the local 6 o'clock news in the background. Danielle wasn't truly paying attention until the anchor delivered news that caught her focus. Breaking. A municipal judge in Macon is currently suspended from their position while an investigation proceeds regarding claims of misconduct. These allegations include discriminatory behavior and potential ethics violations. Alia accidentally dropped a dish into the sink. Wait, is that him? Is that your judge? Danielle asked, slowly sitting down. Looks like it, she replied. The anchor reported that sources verified the investigation began following a complaint filed earlier today by a local resident, an action that has now initiated an internal review of the judge's prior decisions. Financial documents, sent anonymously to the State Oversight Commission, seem to indicate connections between the judge and several private developers who have received advantages from his rulings. Alia looked at the screen, then at her mother, asking, "You really did that?" Danielle looked at her. "I didn't do all that. I just said something." The rest had been waiting to come out. Alia's face softened. "I'm proud of you, Mama." Danielle touched her daughter's cheek gently. "It's not always about being loud. Sometimes it's just about refusing to stay quiet." Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. New voicemail 1 minute long. She hit play. "Ms. Riggins, this is ADA Kendra Malloy from the Bibb County District Attorney's Office. Thank you for providing the recording. Judge Lannister was taken into custody this afternoon for questioning. Currently, the ethics violations are under formal review and criminal charges are being considered. We would appreciate the opportunity to speak further with you if you are available. Please contact me at your convenience." Danielle observed the screen, then looked up. Alia was watching her, eyes wide. "What now?" she asked. Danielle shook her head. "Now, I will call them back." Unbeknownst to her, a significant number of individuals would come forward in the days following, spurred by her resolute stance conveyed through a voice memo and unwavering resolve. Within 48 hours, Danielle's name circulated discreetly among legal offices, community groups, and even local newsrooms, not as a figure of fame, but as an emblem. She had not sought any of this recognition. She continued going to work, continued picking up Alia from school, and continued reminding the boys at the youth center to keep their pants up and their heads higher. However, things around her began to change. The first indication arrived the following week when Pastor Reuben Fields, who ran a coalition for court reform in Central Georgia, called her during her lunch break. "You don't know me, Ms. Riggins," he began, "but I've known about you since Tuesday. What you did. It wasn't insignificant." Danielle was in her car outside the community center, with a half-finished sandwich on her lap. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know," he stated. "That's why people are paying attention." He requested her to speak at a future town hall. A simple request, just a few words about resilience, about respect, about not allowing authority to dominate individuals who are not always able to retaliate. She paused, but ultimately consented. That evening, Alia assisted her in choosing her outfit. Danielle requested a simple event. Alia playfully suggested, while playfully tossing her a colorful scarf, that someone might capture the occasion for Instagram. "Might as well look unbothered and cute," she said. The town hall was unassuming, with folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, a few trays of donated cookies, and sweet tea. Danielle chose not to bring notes. She stood before approximately 50 people, hands by her sides, and spoke as if addressing one individual. "I didn't record that, Judge, because I wanted to take him down," she stated. "I acted because I'd witnessed too many deserving individuals disregarded, and I refused to suffer a similar fate," the audience acknowledged with nods. Several individuals dabbed their eyes. As she concluded her statement, the attendees rose to applaud. Subsequently, an older woman, adorned with a wide-brimmed hat and holding a folder, approached her. She identified herself as Geraldine Baker, a retired schoolteacher. "I filed a complaint against that same judge in 2021. She stated, her voice gravelly but clear. "They dismissed it, claiming it lacked merit. Perhaps now, someone would listen." Danielle took the folder from her hands. "I'll ensure someone does." In the days that followed, Danielle received more calls. A podcast producer from Birmingham, a law student from Emory, who wanted to write her thesis on ethical failures in lower courts, and a public defender in Albany who asked if Danielle would participate in a courtroom training session for junior attorneys. She declined most requests, not because she was indifferent. She simply wished to avoid having her name become a hashtag. Her goal was for the children she worked with to view her as the same woman who had taught them resume writing and guided them through difficult conversations with their parents. However, she agreed to certain requests, particularly when she understood how many individuals needed reassurance that they weren't irrational. Activity at the center increased. Contributions arrived from people residing outside of Macon. A woman in Tampa contributed 20 backpacks, along with a handwritten message, for the kids you champion and for the ones you're championing. Thank you, Danielle. Alia seemed to gain confidence, too. One afternoon, she announced, Ms. Brenner had us write in civics class about someone in our community who stood up for justice. I wrote about you. Danielle was surprised, asking, really? Alia replied casually, I was planning to choose John Lewis, but he's the obvious choice. Danielle chuckled. I don't think I'm in his league, Alia remarked. Danielle responded, I think you'd surprise yourself. What truly astonished Danielle, however, was the number of individuals who had been waiting quietly and with patience for another person to initiate action. 3 months later, Danielle was seated on the rear steps of the youth center shortly after closing time. The last of the teens had departed for the day, their laughter still resonating softly throughout the parking lot. The Georgia heat lingered, even as the sun descended, casting shadows on the fractured pavement. She took a drink from a water bottle and allowed her body to recover. It had been a demanding day and a demanding few months. She had presented at 4 panels, completed 2 interviews, and received a volume of inbox messages she couldn't manage. The investigation into Judge Lannister had expanded beyond her initial expectations. Following the release of the financial records, additional complaints emerged, not only from Macon, but also from surrounding counties. Rumors circulated suggesting the district attorney could file formal charges. The story had been featured on a national justice blog, and certain advocacy groups were now referencing Danielle's case in their training programs. However, all of that seemed secondary to what she truly prioritized. That day began with her witnessing Quentin, one of her teens, perform his debut spoken word poem at an open mic. He previously avoided eye contact. Now, he stood on stage, telling the audience, when they try to shrink you, that's proof you're already too big to fit their box. No applause was necessary. That single moment justified all the effort. While she was seated, the center's director, Mr. Lou Bailey, came outside. A large man with gentle eyes and a deliberate pace settled beside her with a soft exhale. You know, he began after a moment, most people wouldn't have acted as you did. Danielle kept her gaze forward. It didn't feel like a decision. He nodded thoughtfully. It rarely does when it's the correct action. We've seen staff depart and arrive, but I've never witnessed this place so lively. You provided these children with a unique experience. She allowed the sentiment to resonate. Occasionally, she stated, I believe I simply felt worn out, weary of holding it back. That man seemed to assume he could address me as if I possessed no value, and for a brief moment, I nearly allowed it. However, I then recalled the advice I impart to these children daily. Maintain your posture, make your voice heard, and I understood that I couldn't request that of them if I was unwilling to embody it myself. Mr. Bailey murmured a subdued, and then rose. Are you prepared to secure the premises? Yes. Please allow me a moment. Once he entered the building, Danielle gazed upwards at the sky. A few stars began to appear, dim and dispersed, yet present. She considered the individuals who had remained silent, perhaps because they believed their opinion wouldn't be impactful, or they feared negative consequences, or they were simply weary. And she understood. She genuinely did. However, someone must initiate action. That doesn't signify superiority. It simply indicates they were frustrated enough to proceed, even when the situation felt unstable. Prior to departing, she retrieved her phone and composed a brief message on her social media page, an account she hadn't accessed in weeks. The message read, If it feels like no one sees you, speak anyway. If it feels like they don't hear you, speak anyway. You never know who's watching. After pausing, waiting for a reason to share, she placed her phone in her bag, and secured the door behind her. Occasionally, bravery appears forceful, accompanied by raised fists and resounding chants. Sometimes, the path to change is not dramatic. It can be quiet, consistent, respectful, and involves simply appearing in a courthouse, even when unexpected. Danielle didn't require a platform to create change. She only needed to be present, speak honestly, and refuse to be silenced. In doing so, she not only defended herself, but also created an opportunity for Geraldine, for Quentin, for every voice that had been overlooked for too long, because authentic justice doesn't always begin with grand gestures. Occasionally, it begins with the youngest, with someone unwilling to yield. Should this narrative resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone in your life, or perhaps even reminded you of yourself, please consider subscribing, sharing it, and discussing it, as stories like this are not simply intended to be heard, but meant to be remembered.